My. It's Monday, and it's already one of those days. Okay, show of hands. I want to know who out there, as soon as your kids were asleep last night, you went after that Easter basket. Don't try to hide. I know you're out there. You see, I know there's some folks that have some Cadbury eggs and some jelly beans in their briefcases in their purses.
Just patiently waiting for 8:15.
That's all right. There you go. I like the boldness of that. I love the boldness of that. So I'm the new guy, but you know what? I'm just not going to say anything. I'm going to let you guess. I'm going to do the Rumpelstiltskin thing. No, I'm just kidding. But it's a wonderful morning. You know, there's some breaking news, and at some point we'll turn our attention to that. And as the new guy, that's the first thing you want to do is deal with breaking news. But I'm going to introduce myself. My name is Dez Dickerson. I was actually on a few weeks ago with some friends here on the morning show, and kind of cutting it up, as we say, and having a good time. But I'm back, and I'm going to be with you here for the next few hours. Just briefly, I'm an MTV refugee, lived to tell the tale. In the words of Stephen Wright, I'm a peripheral visionary. I can see the future. It's just way off to one side. But most importantly this morning, I am the founder and chairman of the Clear Thinkers Party. And I'm here, on that basis. We live in, and I'm not telling you anything you don't know, we live in some very interesting times right now. And we live in times that can no longer be framed as they have been in the past by, are you a D or are you an R? Are you red or are you blue? Right, left, not even purely right and wrong anymore. Because, there are very active constituencies trying to blur or even change those concepts. We're living, though, I believe, in an age of reality versus unreality. Throw out all the other stuff. It's reality versus unreality. And it's important for us to understand that we've gone from being a nation with different perspectives to being on different planets. I had a number of years ago, I had a friend who, was one of those meet through a mutual friend kind of things. And interesting guy, but we found immediately that we were polar opposites, ideologically, spiritually, really in the extreme in every conceivable way. But both of us enjoyed debate and polite debate. And this was kind of in the early days of Facebook kind of emerging as a platform and a context for engaging in communication and in debate. I mean, Twitter was still kind of a novelty. This was a while back. So we began to have some epic social media debates, but with no acrimony. No acrimony. We maintained civility, and we treated one another with a high degree of respect. And when you treat people respectfully, you end up developing respect for people. So there came a time, he was actually a maitre d' at one of the restaurants in town, one of the restaurants where they have a maitre d', so, and I happened to be going there for a birthday dinner and got in touch with him and said, hey, can you get us a table? Can you get us a good table? And, he greeted us at the door, and just instinctively, because it was the first time we'd ever met face to face, instinctively, we hugged one another. Instinctively. And by the way, he got us a killer table. But it was a situation where, on the one hand, we disagreed intensely, but on the other, we got along amiably and respectfully. that time I'm concerned is gone forever. True believers of differing viewpoints viewed one another as worthy adversaries then. But now, I think gone are the days when differences of opinion were polite. And I'm gonna give it a name. Again, red, blue, left, right. That stuff is forever compromised. But I'm going to give a name to what we call, the neo-progressives, the left, the whatever. Forget that label. I'm going to call it what it actually is. It's the unreality cohort. It's the unreality cohort. And it reserves unto itself the right to recreate reality in its own image and to define and redefine every aspect of life, not just theirs, but yours too. And we're going to be talking about that this morning. I hope that I'm able to kind of tread that line between, causing us to think, but at the same time, being entertaining, having a good time. The whole idea of tuning in is to spend the time in an enjoyable way. So I want you to enjoy it. I want you to enjoy yourselves. So to accomplish this, and I know we're coming up on a break, Mac, I got Mac with me this morning. There's an for all my baby boomers out there's an old Bobby Darin hit called Mac the Knife.
Yeah.
But I think I'm going to call you Mac the Nice.
I like that.
I dubbed the Mac the Nice. So
yes.
I don't want to blow through my first official.
No, you've got some
break.
time.
Okay, cool.
6 or 7 minutes.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah, perfect.
So, if I glaze over and I don't show any signs of hitting the brakes, feel free to stop me. Stop me. All right. So to accomplish this, back to the unreality cohort. So to accomplish this, they had to hijack the language. And I'm making this point for a purpose. They had to hijack the language. Why? Because words mean things. Words aren't just stuff. They're not just material. Words aren't just sound waves moving through air. Words mean things. And calling a thing something other than what it is doesn't change the thing. But if you can be cowed or browbeaten or shamed or bullied into accepting it, then it can alter your perception of the thing. Does that sound familiar to anybody? Does that sound like where we are right now? Words mean stuff, and they mean what they mean, and we don't get to decide differently. But control the language of a people, and you control the people. And see, the unreality cohort are the tribe of it is if we say it is. Well, this is a buffalo. Well, no, that's not a buffalo. That's a gerbil. Nope, this is the buffalo. Well, no, it's a gerbil. No, you racist, sexist, bigot. It's a buffalo. Well, now you got a decision to make. Are you going to just acquiesce and call it a buffalo? Or are you going to stay firmly rooted in reality and say, no, dude, this is a gerbil? Control the language of a people and you control the people. There's the tribe of it is if we say it is, and then there's the rest of us. So see, this is why I stopped a long time ago. I don't call myself a conservative. That's like, I remember back in school, and it was a while back, but I can still remember it. This was before Post-it notes. So somebody would rip a piece of like notebook paper in half and write on it, kick me, I'm an idiot. And then get some Scotch tape, walk by somebody in the hall, slap them on the back and actually stick the sign on them. So that they're walking down the hall with this sign that says, kick me, I'm an idiot. And you know what? If you call yourself a conservative these days, it's kind of tantamount to wearing that sign. So I don't do that. And I certainly don't self-identify as a Republican. Although, if you're a clear thinker, and again, I'm the founder and president, CEO of the Clear Thinkers Party. If you're a clear thinker, the only place you can go to find somebody that seems to think clearly for whom you can vote is the Republican Party. But, standing in the garage doesn't make me a Buick. Voting for someone doesn't make me a Republican. I was once registered Republican. I fess up to that. But, I did lots of things at one time, and we're not going to go into those this morning. It's too early. So these terms have been co-opted by the unreality cohort. They've been co-opted and turned into pejoratives. It's turned into a "kick me, I'm an idiot" sign. And as the great Maharishi used to say, those words are used to cast you as racist, sexist, bigot, homophobe, xenophobe, transphobe, and I'm sure the list will grow before I get off the air today. But as for me, I refuse to let anybody but God define me. Me and Tupac. Can nobody but God judge me? A little hip-hop joke there. It's something, actually, in all seriousness, is something that I learned growing up in the pre-Civil Rights Act version of America as a young man. And there are all sorts of terms that, people feel pressured to use these days. African American, people of color, whatever the case might, as opposed to what? People of translucence. That one is the most confusing to me. But I'm a Black American, and I've been Black for a long time, so I've gotten pretty good at it. But one of the things I learned growing up in pre-Civil Rights America is that, if you let people define you, if you choose to let people define you, then you've given them a power that renders you powerless. And you become subject to what's in somebody else's head and somebody else's heart. And by the grace of God, I learned early on, no, I don't have to do that. So I refuse to let anybody define me. Least of all those who are devoid of an adult relationship with reality. So that's why I founded the Clear Thinkers Party. And you're welcome to join it with me. There's no membership fee. There are no annual dues. All you have to do is maintain clarity, stay rooted in objectivity, and refuse to be defined by those who would attempt to get you to bow the knee to unreality.
Is there any sort of hazing, or is it just kind of I get a card and I'm in? Or
well, that's actually a good idea. I think we might have to come up with some sort of hazing. But it'll be something appropriate.
Yeah, of course, of course.
I'll make you listen to Joy Behar for 8 hours straight. Something along those lines. We'll come up with something. So join with me today. We're going to take a break. It's Super Talk 99.7 WTN. I'm Dez, the new guy, and the cartoon has begun.
All right, we got the regular construction it has become in Rutherford County. So eastbound 24 down to one lane. That for that construction that starts at Church Street in Murfreesboro. Also monitoring the shooting, the nation's latest mass shooting. It is in downtown Louisville, Kentucky. Details coming up at 9:30 on Super Talk 99.7 WTN.
Man, oh man. Well, we'll get back to the breaking news here in a bit. There's an infamous clip of Alec Baldwin, who it's safe to say is in the hierarchy of the unreality cohort. But I digress. But it's a clip of Alec Baldwin doing talk radio like one time. And it's on the one hand, it's like fascinating and entertaining, but at the same time, it's a cautionary tale, because the thing about talk radio is time. When you're being interviewed, when you're a guest on a show, time flies by. But if you're hosting, time slows down. And 3 hours is a long time. It's like some kind of weird Doctor Who pocket universe, wibbly wobbly, timey wimey kind of thing. So anyway, I'm new to hosting on radio, but I'm not new to radio. I've been in the music business in one form or another for, literally almost all my life, since I was, 14 years old. And so I have been around radio and been on radio a lot. And for example, I bet right now somewhere in the world, but my life is just a party, and that's playing somewhere even as we speak. Been interviewed and, very comfortable with that. But it's a different kind of a reality on the other side of the mic. So I'm making the adjustment. And the big thing I'm finding is, don't get hooked into the commercials. Because I start listening to commercials and all sorts of one-liners start coming into my head. For example, I thought, yeah, the weed man, that had a whole different meaning when I was in high school. And there was something about getting rid of troublesome weed or something. I don't know, but we didn't have any trouble getting rid of it back then. But I digress. So I got to be careful with those commercials. So we're going to actually, you know what? Maybe now would be a good time to do it. Just bounce back early to Ken and let him give us a little bit more context with respect to the breaking news. Is this a good time to do that?
Yeah, that's fine, Dez. This is an ongoing situation. However, in downtown Louisville right now, police are confirming that there are 5 dead, 6 taken to the hospital after a shooting. This is in a bank building in downtown Louisville, and they say that the threat, as they put it, is neutralized. Of course, you start getting a lot of that cop talk, as the investigation is in the early stages. But I guess the good news out of this right now is that there is no longer a threat to anyone else in downtown Louisville. Massive police presence down there, as you could imagine. So it looks like the nation's latest mass shooting is just north of Nashville in Louisville, Kentucky.
Yeah. So the next threat is going to be the onslaught of opportunist commentators. But I'll get to that later, because I actually was planning on touching on something related in a later segment this morning. So, again, we hate to hear about this. We hate to hear that there's been another mass shooting. And at the same time, the reality, again, is this is the world that we live in right now.
Unfortunately,
it's the world. It's the only world we got, folks. So let's. Are we going to be people of reality, or are we going to give place to unreality? So let's do this. I'm going to keep drilling down into this reality versus unreality thing, because that's the context in which I'm going to be, communicating with you going forward. Now that I'm here, unless I step on a rake and then all bets are off. But what are the strongholds of unreality in our culture right now? And I'm kind of asking it rhetorically, but at the same time, I do want to challenge us to think about that. And we don't have to think much or think long, because there's way too many to name, because we're in the age of, we're in the age of proliferated unreality. Let me use this as an example. There was a time when there were 3 broadcast networks, 4 major record labels, and I think 5 radio formats. And it might be the other way around. It might be 4 radio formats and 5 major record labels. But that was it. The funnels through which, what we now call content, the funnels through which these things reach the people, reach the masses, were limited to those 3 networks, those, 4 record labels, and those 5 radio formats. But think about it. Now, there are billions and billions of channels. There was a time I remember sitting in front of the TV with my family, Sunday night, time for the Ed Sullivan Show. We watched the Ed Sullivan Show as a family every Sunday. It wasn't a black thing, it wasn't a white thing, it was an American thing. And the funny thing is that Ed Sullivan could come near no parts of a TV show now. My man wouldn't pass the audition. But he was the most trusted and well-known television host of that era. But I remember watching the Beatles, and I remember, seeing them on screen, and, they came to the close-ups, and at the bottom of the screen, when John Lennon came up, sorry, girls, he's married, which, by the way, is where they nicked that idea for one of my favorite rock and roll movies of all time, That Thing You Do. They kind of did that same thing with the Wonders, but I digress. You'll find that I digress often, but it's back to that high school thing. No, not really. Okay, so we're going to. I'm going to continue that later, but we're going to break for news, and you are listening to Super Talk 99.7 WTN. Be back in a minute.
I'm Ken Weaver with your top stories, and right now, police in Louisville confirming 5 people killed after an active aggressor, as they call it, opened fire inside a downtown office building. Here's Jim Ryan.
Office workers were starting their week when the first shots were fired before 9 in the morning.
We have a break room, and I got in there and shut the door for a second. I opened the door to see where he was at, and I could see him still shooting. I didn't see his face. And then I took off running out the front door.
The police say 5 people were killed, 6 were wounded, including a police officer. The suspect also has been killed.
Again, this is in a bank building in downtown Louisville. Police are advising people to stay out of the area. Again, the threat is neutralized. And in a tweet, Kentucky Governor Andy Beshear says he is headed to the scene. He asks that you please pray for all the families impacted and for the city of Louisville. That's the latest news. Weather is next. I'm Ken Weaver, WTN News.
One of the big words being thrown around in the investing world right now is this one. You may have heard it. Fiduciary. The idea that the investment advisor has to keep your interest first when they give advice. Now, it's being used in a marketing sense right now, and one of the things that I found fascinating, there was a study by the University of Southern California and Indiana University. They looked at investment advisor portfolios, and they found that they were making basic academic mistakes in the management of their own portfolios. And the question that they asked was, if they can't even keep their own best interest first, how are they going to keep your best interest first? That was the question. Now, one of the things that we do at Paul Winkler Inc. is every one of our offices, 10 offices, is run by a degreed planner, number one. But we go way beyond the call of duty when it comes to fiduciary and making sure that we're using academically sound principles in investing. Evidence-based. In other words, a lot of this is backed by Nobel Prize winning research. To learn more about our approach to investing in financial planning, go to paulwinkler.com and set up a free 15-minute phone call or call 615-851-1950.
awesome. So the song that I was all right. Now it's a party. I got my music now. See,
Yeah.
we weren't able to use my music for the open. You know, they say the clothes make the man. No, I believe your open, your intro music. That's what makes the man.
I love that.
So now, I hope you didn't spill your coffee, but now it's on. It's on like Donkey Kong. Okay. So, and the commercial link, I got to share this one. And I promise you, I'm going to stop like tripping on the commercials. But wouldn't it be funny if there was a mashup of a mortgage insurance commercial with a mortgage company commercial? What would it sound like? It'd be something like, hey, here at TakeTheyMoney.com, you can take out up to 100% of somebody else's equity. You know what I mean? It would just be, anyway, I think of these things. So, meanwhile, back in reality, I was talking about the analogy of in days of old, the funnels through which society, the culture received not just information, but really at the end of the day, instruction as to what to embrace as the next big thing, or what to embrace or recognize as the norms, for example. There were really very few channels through which those things flowed, and as a result, a smaller number of people could control those things and steer those outcomes. Well, we're in an age now where there are so many millions of channels of information, data points and platforms of discovery that it's a lot harder to control. But at the same time, if you can manage to find ways to do so, it's actually easier to control. So with respect to the strongholds of unreality in the culture, because remember, that's what we were talking about, we have many, many more exposure vehicles for unreality. We have many more ways. In the past, if unreality wasn't presented by, ABC, NBC, CBS, because that was all there was, then, it was like Walter Cronkite, Huntley and Brinkley, and I'm not making any comment about their sort of, ideological persuasions, because they weren't as neutral as was purported, in those days, but a lot more so than it came to be later on. So what are the strongholds of unreality in the culture? Again, there's way too many to name, but at the same time, there are some that are also, they're way too obvious, and they've been just picked apart ad infinitum. So I don't necessarily want to take us there either, because it's almost like, it's almost like an easy target. It's almost like there are certain things that would be considered unsporting, because it's just, it's the disparity and the inequity is just far too out of whack, which is one of the reasons, by the way, people are outraged, and I'm not meaning to go to this topic now, but we will eventually. People are outraged by biological males competing in women's sports, because there was a time when that just would have been considered, well, that's unsporting. You wouldn't play flag football, as a high school boy against the girls, because it wouldn't be fair and you didn't want to hurt anybody. And I know that's terribly politically incorrect and unwoke now, but, and by the way, woke is another one of the words I don't use, because, unreality. There are some topics that we're just not going to go to with respect to that. But I do want to talk about this. One of the fundamental elements of unreality is a thing called presuppositional thinking. Presuppositional thinking. What does that mean? Well, by definition, presupposition is a thing tacitly assumed beforehand at the beginning of a line of argument or course of action. I'm going to say that again. A thing tacitly assumed beforehand at the beginning of a line of argument or course of action. Well, that sounds like it is if we say it is. Well, that's because that's exactly what it is. It is if we say it is. It's back to that changing the word for a thing doesn't change the thing, but if you can get people to accept that change, then their perception of the thing has successfully been changed. And that is the epitome of unreality culture, the unreality cohort. Presuppositional thinking is critical, because here's the thing. In unreality culture, presuppositions are put forth as fact. It's fact. Well, it's fact. There's consensus. The science is settled. First of all, that runs counter to the scientific method because science is never settled. But that's me being a realist again. Unreality culture presupposes, and the presuppositions of the unreality cohort, they're put forth as fact or incontrovertible, rather, proof of something that has no provable basis in objective fact. In other words, well, you can say it, but that doesn't prove it. Well, not in, and I'm going to probably coin an abbreviation. The unreality cohort is going to become the UC, not in the UC, because it is if they say it is. But that's not a buffalo, that's a gerbil. Well, no, it's not. Yes, it is. No, it's not. Because it is if they say it is. The presupposition is put forth that this is the buffalo. The science is settled. But there's no provable basis in objective fact for that. Doesn't matter. It's gotten 100,000 retweets. That settles it. Well, no, it doesn't. So the one presupposition that we're going to look at, the one aspect of presuppositional thinking that I do want to take the time for us to look at this morning is, and again, I had planned this obviously before we got the news of yet another mass shooting. But we're going to take a look at the more laws means fewer guns. Fewer guns means more people are kept alive presupposition. Because that one was already a hot button, main event, high marquee topic, even before this latest news this morning. The more laws means fewer guns, and fewer guns mean more people, more kids, more bank employees, more people are kept alive. That's a presupposition. It's absolutely a presupposition. Because first, it presupposes that guns are the perpetrators. And this isn't, I'm not postulating something new, but it is something that we need to revisit. This idea that the guns are the perpetrators. And if you outlaw the guns, you put a stop to murder. Because the guns, the perps, the guns were the problems. Well, as is the case with most all presupposition, this assumption is ludicrous on its face. They're not roving bands of guns out wreaking havoc on the city streets. No, it's people. So, first of all, in breaking down this presupposition, first of all, murder is already against the law. Trying to do more to outlaw or limit access to the implement of murder, well, but murder's already against the law. So if outlawing the act itself hasn't achieved the desired outcome, then how will outlawing the thing achieve that outcome? Well, the unreality position doesn't consider those realities. Murder's already against the law. If laws were the solution, that's the granddaddy of them all. Thou shalt not kill. Seems pretty clear to me. Secondly, murder is a lawless act committed by lawless people. It's not the gun, it's the human being wielding the gun. So how are more laws going to prevent lawless people from committing lawless acts? Even so-called common sense gun legislation. Well, murderers don't have common sense. So how's that going to work? I want to talk more about this, and I want to go deeper into this. But we're going to take a break. And when we come back, we'll pick up where we left off. You're listening to Super Talk 99.7 WTN.
All right, got the construction. It's got 24 down to 1 lane eastbound there in Murfreesboro. That's going to be until about 3 o'clock today. And we'll get you the latest. Massive police and FBI presence in Kentucky where multiple casualties are reported in the nation's latest mass shooting. Details coming up at 10 on Super Talk 99.7 WTN.
Yeah, road construction.
Gotta love it.
Gotta love it. Or not.
Yeah.
See,
Not.
I've lived here for 33 years now. So I had one lady who said to me once, well, you know, a lady who's a native Nashvilleian, you've been here long enough, you're considered a native now. So I received that. But see, I grew up in the People's Republic of Minnesota, and there are 2 seasons. There's winter and there's road construction. Now they're really good at it. I mean, they got some James Bond, you know, for your backside when it comes to doing the road work. I mean, they got crews out there in the middle of the night with Klieg lights that look like, you know, something out of a Star Wars movie. But, you know, understand that when summer comes, they're going to be out there working. Here, I can't quite find the same rhyme or reason. 33 years, I'm still trying to crack the code.
I wish they'd do it in the middle of the night.
Well, they should. They should. That's the way they did it where I grew up. And
Yeah.
That's the wise thing to do.
Yeah, and I wish they'd do it where I don't live.
Oh, well, there you go. There you go. Just whatever you do, fix the roads everywhere else, except for where mine need to be fixed.
Exactly, yeah.
And then do that. But do that before I leave the house in the morning. Because otherwise, you know, what's wrong with you?
Oh, man, this thing in Rutherford County, too, I mean, it backs 24 up for 3.5 miles.
Wow.
Yeah, you've been in the epicenter of the construction, Ken, for the last couple of years.
I sat on the off-ramp to Old Fort Parkway for 35 minutes last week.
Oh.
And that's only 3 miles from my house.
Where's the jetpack they promised me? Yeah. Super Talk 99.7 WTN.
Ten o'clock on the dot. I'm Ken Weaver with your top stories. An absolute beautiful week ahead. Just a slight chance for rain the second half. Nothing severe to talk about. Got the full forecast in 2 minutes. But right now in Kentucky, local, state, and federal authorities blocking off streets in downtown Louisville around a bank. Isaiah Kim Martinez has the latest.
This was a mass shooting that we're dealing with right now. 5 people dead. Another 6 sent to the hospital. That's including an officer with various injuries from the gunshots that were fired here downtown this morning.
Yeah, apparently the shooting started right before 9 o'clock. Office workers telling reporters outside.
He had a long assault rifle, and you hear the shots just start firing.
What did he look like?
I didn't see his face.
Police say the suspected shooter has been neutralized. Governor Beshear says he's headed to the scene and asked for prayers for all the families impacted and the city of Louisville. Stay with Super Talk 99.7 WTN for continuing coverage online and on the air. Right now in Tennessee, protesters being asked to be at the state capitol for another rally in support of the 2 ousted state lawmakers, Justin Jones and Justin Pearson, asking everyone to gather at 3:30. Here in Nashville, the city council plans to vote starting at 4 on whether to name Justin Jones to his former seat in the 52nd District. Jones and fellow lawmaker Justin Pearson ousted after the Republican-led State House accused them of breaking decorum rules during a gun reform protest on the House floor. Election 2024, Karen Travers says President Biden's still non-committal while addressing a potential re-election campaign.
President Biden said Monday he plans on running for re-election, a different phrasing than what he's been saying in recent months, which is that his intention is to run. The president talking to NBC News' Al Roker at the White House Easter egg roll.
Well, I plan on running now, but we're not prepared to announce it yet.
Roker tried to get the president to say whether he would take part in the annual Easter event after 2024.
Well, I plan on at least 3 or 4 more Easter egg rolls.
The president told ABC's David Muir in February his intention is to run for re-election, but signaled an announcement was not in the immediate future.
That is the latest news. Weather is next. I'm Ken Weaver, WTN News.
All right, all right. Dez Dickerson here with you this morning. First timer, I'm the newbie. In the words of the late fellow Minnesotan Hubert H. Humphrey, I'm pleased and proud as punch to be here. I don't do a good Hubert Humphrey, but anyway, most of you don't know who he is, so you don't know anyway, so it's okay. And I want to, before I do anything else, I want to thank producer Mac, who I have dubbed Mac the Nice. I have dubbed thee Mac the Nice.
I love it.
For grabbing me some coffee, because I was, the indicator light was coming on. But as I sipped this, and you do have to sip it, I thought, man, it's been a long time since I've had like radio station coffee. It kind of, I felt the hair in my ears dissolving. But
there's no telling how long that's been sitting there, Brother Dez.
Well,
sorry, sir.
I have a pretty good guess. And I think maybe Carter was in office at the time. I think maybe Rosalind made this coffee.
Oh.
But it's doing the job, because there's something about coffee that's been sitting for a minute.
Well, one thing about it, it's always well done.
There you go. You don't have to worry about, getting, like, what is it, botulism you get from meat that's not cooked properly? You're not going to get botulism from this guy. You might have hallucinations. But,
yeah, you might do that.
But beyond that. So, seriously, it's great to be here. I years ago, I used to, call in and talk with the late, great Uncle Phil, love that guy. When he was on the air, and he had often encouraged me, you should think about going into talk radio. And it was one of those things that, well, yeah, I think it'd be fun. And I think I could do it. So it's kind of like, give my props to Uncle Phil right now. I'd pour one out for my homie, but this coffee would probably burn through to the next floor. So I'm not going to do that. But in all seriousness, I just want to give kudos to him. So we're talking about the unreality cohort, and we're talking about unreality culture this morning. And specifically, we were talking about how in unreality culture, the presuppositions that are put forth as fact, an inarguable fact. In fact, if you don't agree with our facts, what's wrong with you? You're the problem. No gaslighting or anything. And on the one hand, it's not that it's a new thing, but on the other hand, because of the fact that we have more means of amplifying and proliferating that perspective and that point of view now than we ever have before. And also, there's some generational susceptibility. Mac, and you're a guy, so I can ask you, how old are you?
I'm 24.
Okay, prime. You're at the leading edge of Gen Z.
Yep.
And that's the generation that scares the stew out of me.
Yeah. Yep. That's totally fair. I wish I was associated with another one, but
no, and I get it. But here's the thing. There's a higher level of suggestibility that's kind of as the timeline from post World War II to baby boom to Gen X to we first called Gen Y, then we began calling millennial to Gen Z. As we've gone down that continuum, the level of suggestibility has gone up and up. In the early days of the founding, the greatest problem that faced the populace with respect to information was being underinformed. And hence, the flyers and the things that they did back in those days. And by the way, there was fake news back then too. People weren't tweeting it, but there was fake news back then. But it kind of went from that to the era of misinformation or partial information. Maybe that was a gradient in between. But then we moved from partial information to misinformation. And from misinformation now to malinformation. So when you have a generation that's susceptible to receiving malinformation, because if it was said, it must have been true. Well, it was retweeted 150,000 times. It must be true. I saw it on Instagram. It must be true. Well, but that's not the litmus test. So unreality has much more fertile ground in which to spring forth than it ever has before. And there used to be a common sort of foundational wisdom that said, well, don't just believe it because you heard it. Now the question is, well, why are you disbelieving this? Because everybody's heard it. As if there's some sort of validity conferred to the number of times something has been said. Well, there was a guy named Goebbels that actually, he bottled that one once upon a time. So in unreality culture, presuppositions are put forth as fact or incontrovertible proof of something that actually has no provable basis in objective fact. Objective fact, not subjective fact, because subjective facts are fake facts. Objectivity, well, what's true is true. And I'm going to just go here for a minute. What's true is true, irrespective of your opinion, irrespective of what you do or don't believe, what you do or don't accept. What's true is true. What's true is true with a capital T. Because there is a source of truth. And I'm not going to get too deep into it right now, but truth isn't an opinion. Truth isn't a viewpoint. Truth isn't a poll result. What's true is true. And it's true whether everyone believes it, and it's true if no one believes it. What's true is true. So putting forth a presupposition and just expecting people to believe it because you said it, well, that's obviously ridiculous. But we're in the age of ridiculous. So the one presupposition that we began looking at is this: more laws means fewer guns, and fewer guns means more people kept alive. It means mass shootings prevented. It means a number of things that, again, they postulate that it represents. It portends the end of all killing. But there's already a law against killing. There has been for a long time. There has been since social media was a stone tablet, for crying out loud. Murder's been against the law. So if outlawing murder was the solution, well, we would have been murder-free for how many years now? There was it I think it was a Sylvester Stallone movie where it was sometime in the future and murder had been completely eliminated, but then like a murderer kind of came out of stasis or something and was wreaking havoc in Los Angeles. There's a new thing, someone wreaking havoc in Los Angeles. But anyway, that comes to mind that there are people that somehow believe that we can make life imitate art, and we can bring about that society where if we just pass enough laws, if we pass the right laws, the right regulations, we can end violence in our time. Neville Chamberlain. But that presupposition it's ludicrous on its face. The idea that if you outlaw guns, you put a stop to murder because the guns are the perpetrators, well, that's ridiculous. So not only is murder already against the law, but murder is, in its essence, it's a lawless act committed by lawless people. And again, it's not the gun committing the murder, but it's the human being wielding it, or the knife, or the hammer, or the tire iron, although there aren't really many tire irons around anymore. It's the act of lawlessness committed by a lawless human being. So the idea that more laws are going to prevent lawless people from committing lawless acts is dissociative. And here's what we try to do. We try to bargain with unreality because we don't want to be made fun of. We don't want to be canceled. We don't want to be humiliated. We don't want to be flamed. And we could go on and on. So there's a tendency because people want to be liked. Everybody just wants to be. It's the Sally Field thing. You like me. You really like me. So we try to bargain with unreality, and we try to come up with a compromise. So there's this concept, there's this idea of common sense legislation, common sense gun laws, common sense regulations. There will find middle ground with lawlessness. Well, that's in a way that's more insane. Because, first of all, murderers don't have common sense. And secondly, the idea that we're going to find some sort of happy medium is wishful thinking. And wishful thinking is not reality either. Well, but there are people who are unstable that are getting their hands on guns, and we have to prevent that. I totally agree. I'm not in favor of, gun distribution centers calling all unstable people, come and get your Glock. Nobody's saying that. Absolutely no one is saying that. But at the same time, there are laws and there are regulations and there are measures in place right now to prevent unstable people from purchasing guns. But that doesn't prevent unstable and lawless people from procuring firearms. It doesn't stop it. Well, but it's just that we don't have enough. That's never worked. And that's always the legislative path. Well, I know we told you that this last law was going to take care of it, but we just didn't do enough. It's like socialism. It just hasn't been done right yet. This will never be, quote, done right, because lawlessness is the problem. And lawlessness is a human choice that produces and informs a human condition. Lawlessness. So all of this is the polar opposite of clear thinking. This is where I'm going. If we're going to be clear thinkers, if you're going to be members in good standing in the Clear Thinkers Party, well, you have to reject all of that on its face. And that's one of the key principles of clear thinking, is you identify the presupposition. And if that presupposition is dissociative, if that presupposition is rooted in unreality rather than reality, reject the presupposition. Don't argue the point that's being made. Reject the presupposition. And in this case, I reject the presupposition that more laws will eliminate lawlessness. It will not. It's the opposite of clear thinking. In fact, it's intellectual pandemonium. And it's a prime example of it is if we say it is ism. Because it's never prevented in the sustainable sense, it's never prevented acts of lawlessness. And once again, today we face again another act of senseless, violent lawlessness in Kentucky. And, I've been on the air, so I haven't heard the talking heads. But no doubt, as soon as that news hit, the chorus was ratcheted up. It was already people were still singing the tune from the tragedy that we suffered here in our town a few weeks back. But the chorus of voices singing the song of unreality isn't a solution. See, a prerequisite to clear thinking is identifying and obliterating unreality constructs on sight. And we need to take that stand and continue to take that stand. It's kind of like, there's an old movie called The Invasion of the Body Snatchers. It's been remade, I think, about 28 times. I'm not sure. But in the invasion of the body snatchers, the premise is there's this alien invasion, but it's not overt, it's covert. And what they do is they come and they manage to genetically hijack human beings and create these replicants that look like the person, act like the person, and take the person's life over, but they're actually an alien. They're an alien substitute. And these alien substitutes have this ability to spot people who are not alien substitutes, and they call them out. And they do this thing where they point and they make this hideous, loud, inhuman sound that gets the attention of all the other alien substitutes. They call it out. Well, there's something for us to glean from that. There's some things that we need to call out. And I'm not saying be unkind. I'm not saying, be the thing that you hate on the other side of the issue. But I am saying that it's important for us to be clear thinkers and to be committed to clear thinking. And identifying and obliterating these constructs, these presuppositions, is central to being a clear thinker. We're going to talk more about this in a minute. You're listening to Super Talk 99.7 WTN.
All right, I'm seeing heavy traffic, the East Loop downtown if you're eastbound. And then south of Nashville, you've got that construction. Only one lane open, 24 eastbound there in Murfreesboro. Another mass murder, this one at a bank in Kentucky. We've got the very latest coming up at 10:30 on Super Talk 99.7 WTN.
All right. Thank you, Ken. So just going to continue riffing here. And by the way, Mac the Nice brought me another cup of coffee. Much, much, much improved over the first one. It's It's less viscous than that first brew was.
Viscous?
Yeah, I think most of the water had been like cooked out of that first batch. So it more resembled like, like W30 like motor oil.
Oh, yeah.
With caffeine in it.
Yeah.
Which, there's a place for that too. But I digress because I do that for a living. So we're talking about clear thinking and unreality constructs. So a prerequisite to being a clear thinker is to seek and destroy unreality where you find it and to reject it. That's what separates clear thinkers from Kool-Aid drinkers. That's it. Because it's a binary thing. I can't be a sort of clear thinker. I can't walk in partial clarity. And again, that's the line that a lot of people try to walk, especially politicians, especially folks in Washington and other places where people are elected to offices and then develop situational amnesia with respect to who sent them there. Separating the clear thinkers from the Kool-Aid drinkers. That's why we're here, ladies and germs. So that cyclical debate that was already raging again among us, undoubtedly, there's been accelerant thrown on that fire this morning with news of yet another shooting. The problem is the guns. Get rid of the guns and get rid of the problem. Well, that battle cry has been on for a long time, but that comes from a place of unreality. Reject the presupposition, and the unreality cohort, though, will vilify you as a gun fetishist and an accessory to murder. Because the NRA and gun owners are not just the villains, but they're demonic if you listen to the narrative that comes from that cohort. I mean, just go online, and I'm sure most of you have already. But, your timeline probably has some of the same dissociative, vitriolic stuff in it that mine does. Because I always have had lots of friends who don't necessarily think the way I think or agree with what I would agree with. I happen to believe that when everyone thinks the same thing, no one thinks. So that felt need to sort of vet people based on whether or not they agree with everything in my manifesto, well, I think that makes for very small, very narrow people. And I refer back to the story I shared earlier about my friend from years ago. We didn't agree on anything, but I had great respect for the man. Now, unfortunately, he took his own life several years back. And one doesn't know what brings people to those decisions. But I do know this, that clear thinking leads to positive, constructive, helpful decision-making in the life of an individual, in families, in organizations, in communities, and in societies. And the opposite is true. Every time a society loosens the reins of reality and slips into unreality, they simultaneously slip into darkness. Fall of the Roman Empire, anybody? So reject the presupposition and understand that they're going to come after you. All those folks that are like just, copying and pasting and, the meme speak is at threat level threat level red, because we've become a meme culture now. It's an easy way to try to stand up and really it just comes down to trying to signal our virtue. But and I got to say something real quick, because I heard in the news that there's another protest. They're calling for another protest. Man, people have lost the plot. There's a generation that has no idea what protest is actually about and what it's actually for. Because it's not a virtue signaling device. I happen to grow up in the age where protest came to the fore culturally. I happen to live the first 9 years of my life in pre-Civil Rights Act America, as I mentioned earlier. So people of courage and conviction risked their very lives to stand up and become a message, so that message might be amplified, so that other people could see what they had not previously seen, because it wasn't part of their experience. So we're going to come back to that in a minute, and we're going to wax eloquent further on that stuff. But we do want to dig as deeply into this as we can, because later on this morning, I want to hear what you have to say about it. All right? So you're listening to Super Talk 99.7 WTN.
I'm Ken Weaver with your top stories. Full forecast in 2 minutes. And right now in Kentucky, another mass murder, this one at a bank. Terrified office workers sent scrambling right before 9 o'clock.
He had a long assault rifle, and you hear the shots just start firing.
What did he look like?
I didn't see his face.
This is downtown Louisville. Metro Deputy Police Chief Paul Humphrey.
The shooter was confirmed to be dead on the scene. We do not know exactly the circumstances of his death at this time. 5 people have been confirmed to have been killed inside. At least 6 were transported to University of Louisville Hospital, including 1 officer with various injuries.
Yeah, the FBI and ATF are also on the scene, and a very emotional Kentucky Governor Andy Beshear says he is very close to a number of the victims, personal friends of his. That's the latest news. Weather is next. I'm Ken Weaver, WTN News.
One of the big words being thrown around in the investing world right now is this one. You may have heard it. Fiduciary. The idea that the investment advisor has to keep your interest first when they give advice. Now, it's being used in a marketing sense right now, and one of the things that I found fascinating, there was a study by the University of Southern California and Indiana University. They looked at investment advisor portfolios, and they found that they were making basic academic mistakes in the management of their own portfolios. And the question that they asked was, if they can't even keep their own best interest first, how are they going to keep your best interest first? That was the question. Now, one of the things that we do at Paul Winkler Inc. is every one of our offices, 10 offices, is run by a degreed planner, number 1. But we go way beyond the call of duty when it comes to fiduciary and making sure that we're using academically sound principles in investing. Evidence-based. In other words, a lot of this is backed by Nobel Prize winning research. To learn more about our approach to investing in financial planning, go to paulwinkler.com and set up a free 15-minute phone call, or call 615-851-1950.
Yeah. Had to throw that in there. Dez Dickerson on with you this morning, carrying us into a Monday morning. Some of you have hit the sugar slump with that purloined Easter candy that you stole from your children in the dead of night. And I would have done it, except he had his locked in his room. No, just kidding. There is something about chocolate, though. There is something about chocolate. And, supposedly, chemically, there's something, and someone could probably call in and tell us about this. Something about the composition of it. There's a substance in chocolate that is soothing. That's why, people that have had their hearts broken, eat chocolate, supposedly. I just eat it because it tastes good. But real chocolate, though, not that fake stuff, not that waxy stuff. Anyway, meanwhile, back on topic. So I want to be clear about something. I want to make this perfectly clear. You don't need to be a gun owner or firearms enthusiast to reject the premise that the problem is the guns. Just get rid of the guns and you get rid of the problem. You don't have to be a gun owner, because clear thinking leads directly to the reality of the matter. And I'm just gonna, kind of have one of those moments of transparency. I have never in my life owned a firearm and haven't fired a gun since I was in my, late teens, early 20s. Because I grew up in a household where that, my mom didn't like guns. My dad really didn't care either way, but he wasn't an enthusiast. He was in the service, but he was in the Navy and, wasn't an infantryman or anything like that. So I mentioned to a friend of mine in my late teens that I'd never fired anything other than like a BB gun, because everybody had a BB gun when I was a kid. That whole, be careful, you're going to shoot somebody's eye out. Well, that was my generation. So he heard me say this, and my friend he was a Vietnam vet, good man. I learned a lot from him. And he was, when I said that, you would have thought I just said I'm sacrificing goats in the backyard, because he just got this horrified look on his face and says, we're going to the range. We're going to the range tomorrow. And so he took me out on the range and handed me a .357 Magnum. Now, remember, I had never fired a handgun in my life. So, in fact, no, wait a minute. I think it was a .44 Magnum. At any rate, it was a big freaking gun. And, he showed me the grip and he showed me how to stand and whatever. And said, now this is going to kick a little bit. So I grew up playing football, before I stopped growing and everybody else kept growing. So, I've been hit, and I was kind of one of those guys that relished contact. So it wasn't like, but that thing about kicked me into the next county.
That was too much.
And it sounded like, it felt and sounded like I held an Atlas rocket in my hand at that moment.
God.
Yeah, man, that was like, on the one hand, I liked it, but on the other hand, it frightened me.
Yeah.
But here's the thing, though. At that point, it was like, all right, I have an adult understanding now of what this is about. And I have never been anti-gun, ever. Just never owned one, And I will say this, as a clear thinker, I have for years rejected the delusional stance that more laws are the solution. But I will say this, however, our gunless state at the Dickerson house is about to change. The Dickerson family is about to get strapped, y'all. So, and let me translate this for my friends in Williamson County. I lived in Williamson for 32 years. Settle down. Strapped is an African American colloquialism for carrying a firearm.
We are going to purchase some firearms.
That's right. We're going to purchase some firearms. We're about to get strapped up in here. And I'm not talking about, just one or two. I'm talking about, because I started out this morning talking about the age in which we live. And if we're going to be clear thinkers, if we're going to be people of reality, then one of the things we have to recognize are the times and the seasons. And it's different than it was, certainly when I grew up. It's probably different than it was when Mac was in elementary school, because there's been an acceleration of some real deeply weird stuff. But at the same time, very real stuff. So with respect to lawlessness and some of these other issues that we're touching on today, part of the reality approach, part of the reality response is recognizing that, well, no, you have to be prepared to protect yourself. And the unreality cohort wants to strip you of not only the ability, but the right to defend yourself. In our family, we are planning on, not just thinking about, we are planning on moving out into the country, out of ways, not way out in Hooterville, but out of ways. Here's just the stone reality. At the point where you do that, drive times from police stations, etc., are increased. So even if you have the most efficient, proficient law enforcement organization around, in your county, in your jurisdiction, at your disposal, just because you dialed 911 doesn't mean Obi-Wan Kenobi is going to show up on the scene in the next 5 seconds. So I got to be in a position, if I have to do what I got to do. So that's why, probably going to be the first in my family, we're about to get strapped. But if clarity informs your perspective, then don't buy into the emotional assertion that just, melting the guns is going to prevent heinous, senseless, and murderous acts. Because it's not. Because evil is still going to do evil. Yes, there is evil. If there is good, there is evil. And lawlessness is going to be lawlessness. Haters are going to hate. And the lawless are going to be lawless. And making something illegal has never prevented lawless people from finding a way to procure the thing that has been made illegal. In fact, lawless people always get rich when people try to outlaw things as a solution. There are folks that got rich during Prohibition because anytime you try to keep people from something, and I'm not talking about, things that have no place in a civil society, and that's where, the unreality cohort is trying to create the slippery slope right now, perceptually, but stick with the truth, people. But I am talking about things that as people who are under the Constitution of the United States and the Bill of Rights, where you have freedoms. You even have the right to be stupid. You have the right to remain stupid. Anything you say can and will be held against you, but we have the right to be stupid if we want to be. So every time supposedly well-meaning people, and I think it's more, trying to score virtue points a lot of times with respect to lawmakers, not all, but oftentimes. Every time that's the motive and action is taken to that end, there are people who become wealthy in the draft of misguided attempts to try to control the uncontrollable legislatively. See, personally, I don't rely on government to legislate fairness, certainly, but even to try to legislate sanity, because it doesn't have the power to do so. So don't buy into the emotional assertion that melting the guns, it's going to prevent senseless and murderous acts like the one that, again, unfortunately, tragically, we've seen take place again today. And certainly, let me say this, pray for the people affected. I'm sorry, you can't stop me from praying. And for those of you who want to ridicule people who respond in prayer, let's see how that works out. Okay, I'm very patient when it comes to those kinds of things. And at some point, the clock will hit zero in this thing called life. And we're going to find out. We're going to find out who's naughty or nice. Now, that's bad theology, but I digress. So, yes, pray for the people affected. And if you're in a position to do something to help, do so. But this idea that, again, if we just get rid of the guns, we'll stop this, well, that's just false. And is always the case. The opposite of unreality is the actual solution, the opposite of reality. The true solution is the opposite of reality. So the issue itself isn't really the desired outcome. The desired outcome of people not being endangered by lawless and evil people, nobody disagrees on that outcome. There's nobody that disagrees on either side or in between. No one disagrees. And this idea that the unreality cohort tries to put forth, that if you are a gun owner or you're in favor of guns or you oppose the elimination of guns, then you're a murderer too. Well, that's that pejorative, knee-jerk response of that cohort. Because nobody disagrees with the desired outcome of protecting our children and our families, our citizenry, red and yellow, black and white. They are precious. And nobody disagrees with that. The unreality cohort values the feels like and the looks like of it, though. Never the reality of it. And I know we're probably coming up on a break. So I want to slow my roll a little bit. I want to break as I enter the intersection here, but we're going to continue. You are listening to Dez Dickerson this morning on Super Talk 99.7 WTN. We'll be right back.
Traffic problem downtown. This is going to be the East Loop, eastbound. You got a disabled vehicle blocking the right lane right there at Shelby Avenue. Then south of Nashville in Murfreesboro, 24 eastbound down to one lane for construction starting at Church Street. That's backed up all the way to Old Fort Parkway. That's about a 3.5 mile backup. We'll get you the very latest after another mass shooting in downtown Louisville. Police are speaking. So is the governor. Details at 11 on Super Talk 99.7 WTN.
All right. Dez Dickerson, the newbie, the new guy, just, up here as a probie this morning, just trying to get accepted into the fraternity. But seriously, it's been a blast. It's been this may be the most fun I've ever had with my clothes on before. So
Oh, God.
It's right up there.
It's sweet.
So here's the thing. I mentioned earlier. I don't know if anybody, if either of you guys have heard that clip, the Alec Baldwin clip, where he's like, he's guesting on this talk show and he's just dying.
Ugh.
He's just dying. I mean, he kind of ran out of things to say in about 32 seconds.
Ooh.
And then it's like he's begging them to open the phone lines. Can we please? So they open the phone lines, but nobody calls in.
Oh.
So anyway, it's anytime you have trepidation about sitting behind this microphone, just think about Alec and understand that is truly, that's radio hell right there.
That's rough.
That's rough. But we're going to be spending more time. We're going to go a little deeper into this topic of perspective and reality, unreality, and firearms and other things. But we're about to take another break. Coming up on a break, you are listening to Super Talk 99.7 WTN. We'll be back.
$11 o'clock on the dot this Monday morning. I'm Ken Weaver with your top stories. Again, you got the East Loop downtown eastbound backed up because the right lane is blocked by a disabled vehicle right there at Shelby Avenue. Then south of Nashville, that construction underway on 24 eastbound. It's down to one lane again right there at Church Street, backed up for about 3 miles. Right now in Kentucky, another mass shooting downtown Louisville. Police confirm 5 dead, several others injured. Jim Ryan says it happened in a bank building.
Office workers were starting their week when the first shots were fired before 9 in the morning.
We have a break room, and I got in there and shut the door for a second. I opened the door to see where he was at, and I could see him still shooting. I didn't see his face, and then I took off running out the front door.
The police say 5 people were killed, 6 were wounded, including a police officer. The suspect also has been killed.
Louisville Metro Deputy Police Chief Paul Humphrey.
There is no active threat. We believe this is a lone gunman involved in this that did have a connection to the bank. We're trying to establish what that connection was to the business, but it appears he was a previous employee.
Fighting back tears, Governor Andy Beshear confirms he knew 3 of the victims, and he thanked first responders who got to the scene as quickly as possible.
I want to thank them and all our other law enforcement officers for responding and doing their best to try to save some of my friends and many others.
President Biden has been briefed. Right now in Nashville, a flyer going around says today will be a day of action for more gun control rallies and to support the 2 Democrat state representatives expelled for breaking House rules of decorum to lead anti-gun rallies on the floor. 3:30 at Metro Plaza, then 4:30 at the Metro Council meeting where former District 52 State Rep Justin Jones could be reappointed to the seat from which he was expelled. Channel 4's Joylyn Bukovac reports.
So far, 23 of the 40 Metro Council members have gone on the record saying they are planning to reinstate Justin Jones at today's special called council meeting. All it will take is half.
Then after the council meeting, another march to the state capitol. That's the latest news. Weather is next. I'm Ken Weaver, WTN News.
All right. Dez Dickerson with you this morning. I hope your day is well underway, because I know ours is here. And I don't know. I think that as we sort of round the clubhouse turn into the final hour, I mentioned it earlier, but I think we need to take some calls. And I had a little Alec Baldwin flashback as I said that, but we're going to take some calls later this hour, I think, if possible. But right now, I want to continue on and kind of finish striping the field on the topic that we've been looking at this morning. So, if clarity informs your perspective, and what we're talking about is the issue of being in the age not of right versus left, not red versus blue, not even solely right versus wrong, but it's reality versus unreality. And there is a cohort that I call the unreality cohort. And there's a lot of things a lot of terms you can use, but the thing that I am trying to get away from is just solely operating on the basis of labels. Because if we make the mistake of defining people rather than allowing their actions and their words to do the job for us, because when people show you who they are, believe them the first time, we will never lessen the negative effects of this extremity of mutual sort of demonization that we're in and that we've been in. And it's accelerated over the course of the past 8 years. And that's a conversation for another day. But we're talking about with specific respect to guns, the response to what people call gun violence, the continued occurrence of lawless and evil people committing and perpetrating acts of murder and mayhem utilizing firearms. We're talking about this perspective that says that if you eliminate the guns, you eliminate the problem. If you eliminate the object, you eliminate murder. So I'm encouraging you, if in fact you've opted in to become part of the Clear Thinkers party this morning with us, don't buy into the emotional assertion that melting the guns is going to prevent any bad things from happening anymore. Because as always, the opposite of the unreality solution is the actual solution. See, the issue again isn't that there's disagreement on the desired outcomes. Everybody, no one wants. What happened 3 weeks ago? I think it was 3 weeks ago. Nobody wants that. Nobody wants that. I don't care what nation, tribe, or tongue. I don't care what religious affiliation or not. I don't care which political, ideological affiliation. No one wants that. So the issue's not the desired outcome. People don't disagree on that. But there's a presupposition that says if you don't favor their solution, then you do favor mayhem and violence and all these hideous things. And that's a scurrilous accusation, but if we allow ourselves to be cowed by it, then we get what we get. Because the unreality cohort values the feels like and the seems like and the looks like of it, because that's the province of unreality. It feels like and seems like and looks like. And it is if we say it is. So if it feels like it and we say it is, then it is. Well, all of that's nonsense. Anyone who truly cares about the shared desire to save lives and to keep people safe would, with clarity, examine every possible option and support the most effective choice. If we're intellectually and personally, morally, spiritually honest. But instead, what ends up being valued is the ideologically aligned choice. And the people who make the loudest noises are the ideologues. And to some degree, some of the folks that have the megaphone are the ideologues. And that's another difference in our time that didn't exist in the days of Cronkite, Huntley, Brinkley. Again, it's not that they were ideologically neutral, but nothing like it is now. Nothing like it is now. So with the unreality cohort, ideology takes precedence over the allegedly desired outcome. It's really not about preventing it. It's really not. I'm sorry, I said it. Didn't stutter, I said it. It's really not about that. Because if it was, then we would, because we have a shared desire for a safer future, all of us with clarity and objectivity would examine every possible conceivable option and support the most effective choice. That would be the case, but it's not the case. Because again, with the unreality cohort, ideology takes precedence over the allegedly desired outcome. And what it really comes down to is we want to change this, but only our way. We want to change it, but only our way. And if you don't agree with our way, then you're the problem. So here in the state of Tennessee, following the Covenant shooting, and we may go into this more specifically tomorrow and kind of revisit the new legislation, the new legislative action. And even though, in a way, I'm kind of like the guy that the team member that gets on the Zoom call late and then ends up going into a topic that folks have already covered. Even though this is something that's been well covered on this station over the course of the past couple of weeks, in the light of the context that they were unpacking, it would be good for us to kind of go back to it, and maybe we'll do that tomorrow. But there's been legislation that's aimed at placing good people with guns between the lawless and the people of ill intent and the children in schools. Well, if you're sincere and intellectually honest about preventing any future tragedy, well, who would oppose that? Well, ideologues oppose it. Because the issue isn't just preventing that outcome. The issue is the fixation on the guns. And that the guns are the only solution. Melting the guns is the only solution. Outlaw them, ban them. Assault weapons. Well, most people don't even know what an assault weapon is. Because can I tell you something? Every weapon is an assault weapon. It's not a love weapon. It's not a big hug weapon. Every weapon is. A rock is an assault weapon if you use it as a weapon to assault someone. So there's legislation that's been put forth, action that's being taken to put good people with guns in places where they can protect children and innocent people from those with ill will and ill intent. But it's been either ignored or dismissed or mischaracterized by the unreality cohort. And their brethren and sisterin in the media. And you know what? That's kind of an easy target. And I haven't really said anything. I haven't used the M word, this morning. But that is a megaphone. And that is a very particularly ideologically specific megaphone in these days, with some exceptions. And we have the opportunity to choose the voices that we listen to. But at any rate, we're going to continue on with this, and we're going to pivot to the phones here. in a little bit. In fact, why don't we do this? The call-in number is 615-737-9986. 615-737-9986. Can we go to break a little early? And I want to give folks a chance. Don't Alec Baldwin me now. Don't hold out and not call in. But I'm going to give some folks a chance to get queued up, and we're going to talk about this more. You're listening to 99.7 Super Talk 99.7 WTN. We'll be right back.
All right, we got even more traffic problems downtown. In addition to the disabled vehicle blocking up the east loop, now you've got debris in the left lane. So that's going to be backed up for some time. Right now, it's just a 10-minute delay. South of Nashville, you still have the 3.5-mile backup due to construction, 24 eastbound down to one lane due to construction there just right there in Murfreesboro. We've got several people dead and injured after a mass shooting in Louisville. We got the very latest on that coming up at 11:30 on Super Talk 99.7 WTN.
So, here's the common sense message. Do not drive your car into downtown Nashville right now. Don't do it. Because the mayhem is mounting. I suspect a zombie apocalypse before the next break.
Yeah.
So take an Uber to Goodlettsville. Visit our new hometown. We moved to Columbia a couple months back.
Oh, nice. There we go.
It's a lovely community. Just stay out of Nashville right now.
Yeah,
Because
stay out of Murfreesboro, too.
there we go. And while you're at it, stay out the Woolsworth.
Yeah.
One of my favorite lines from one of my favorite movies lately.
Oh, man. A lot of lines in that movie.
My. I might have to go home and watch that later on because that's just a classic. So, would you like some gopher? I'm sorry. I got to get out of it now. So we have a couple calls waiting, and I appreciate you calling in. We're going to just finish striping the field a little bit, and then we're going to take a call. So I have the actual enhanced school safety legislation, HB 322/SB 247. I want to read this. Enacts a multi-tiered accountability plan to ensure exterior school doors are locked while students are present, with opportunities for corrective action. State and local law enforcement will be authorized to check for unlocked doors. Next point, requires that private security guards are held to a high standard and receive active shooter training prior to being posted at Tennessee schools. Requires every school district to establish threat assessment teams, a nationally recognized best practice to ensure students are connected to support services and behavioral health professionals when appropriate. Requires every public and private school to develop annual safety plans, which must include a newly required incident command drill for school leaders and law enforcement to prepare for what to expect in various emergencies. Now, I believe that there's more that's been added to this. I think this is a press release from April 3rd. At any rate, like I said, we're going to get more deeply into this. But the idea that we should protect children is one that supposedly, allegedly, we all agree on. All God's children believe in that idea. So a common sense approach has been taken, but is it broadly supported? Well, it doesn't seem to be. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to take Greg in Kirkville. Greg in Kirkville, we're going to talk to you on the phone. Greg, you there?
Yeah, I'm here. Yeah.
All right.
Hey, yeah. I was just kind of looking at, I look at the whole picture. And, the Second Amendment right is there for us to protect ourselves from an out-of-control government. Now, what party is the one that wants to take all of our rights and our freedom away from us is primarily the Democrat Party. So their agenda, their idea and plan is to try to disarm us as often as possible. So just like in the 70s when we had the gas shortage, we were all told it was a gasoline embargo, which is a big lie. They just simply kept all the oil tankers from coming in and giving us oil. So what they're doing now is they've let 5 million people come across this border hoping that we have shootings so they could try to pass more gun legislation. So these guys want shootings to happen. They don't want to ever prevent it because after Columbine, we could have put a stop to all these shootings by simply having armed people in there. And this, what happened here in Nashville was obvious. He didn't even sneak in. He shot his way in. And if someone was there, some security was there, they would have heard the gunshots and went to go ahead and stop him from looking around. He walked in and looked around, or she, whatever the heck you want to call it, walked around the school finding victims. And it was simple solution would have been just to have some armed people there to defend and protect your children at this school shooting. But that's not the agenda of the Democrat Party.
Well, Greg, thanks for your call. And certainly, tragically, the Covenant shooter was able to gain access by shooting out the glass in a door. Now, my understanding is that the school and the administration went to great lengths to be proactive in protecting their school and their students. And the one weakness that seemed to be there to exploit was that glass was not bulletproof. And certainly, there are different perspectives, on the right, as we say, with respect to the origins of things. And, I'm not going to, I'm not here to confirm or deny any beliefs, theories, speculation, evidence, whatever the case might be, of motivations, origins, etc. Bottom line is, are we going to protect specifically children in schools and do so effectively or not? Do we all agree on that? Do we all say, let's do that and let's do whatever it takes so that people never again send a child to school and that child doesn't come home from school? So, I happen to be alive during the gas crisis of the 70s. And, irrespective of I'm not going to speak to the origins of it, and because there are other people who desire to do that, and we appreciate our last caller sharing his perspective on it. But it was an interesting thing. I mean, when there are things that we feel, we don't call them entitlements, but we really have an entitled attitude with respect to certain things. We expect to be able to drive to the gas station and fill up the car. Now, again, there's a good segment of the unreality cohort that says that your fossil fuels are the problem. That's a conversation for another day. And, you will drive this battery-operated car. Or else. Well, again, conversation for another day. But it was an interesting time. First of all, gas was like at $1 a gallon. If gas was $1 a gallon now, people would be passing out in ecstatic falls if gas was $1 a gallon. But, there were lines and there were fights in line. And there would be... before cell phones, there would be people somehow getting word to other people, hey, they got gas over at, Buckethead's filling station, and, everybody would head over there. So is shortage sometimes, a viable option for people to purposely create for whatever, outcomes they're looking to create to their benefit? Well, yeah, that happens. I'm not going to go there with respect to shootings and so-called gun violence, these kinds of things, because there's never a shortage of evil people with malintent. So whatever their motives are, whatever the sourcing of those motives, I mean, the bottom line is there are lawless people and there is evil. And there are people that are taking opportunities to prey on innocent people. Interesting, though, that in speaking about the unreality cohort, interesting, though, that there's almost a strict line of demarcation. And the caller did touch on one thing, that those who are in full-throated support of eliminating guns are pretty much entirely in one political party. And those who stand not just in opposition of that effort and that desire, but in support of the Constitution are in the other party. So this has been one of those dynamics that folks have seized on with respect to this whole unreality culture. And the it is if we say it is. And the demonization of people on the basis of just their refusal to bend the knee to the unreality. Just the refusal to allow themselves to be defined, directed, dictated to by those who have an ideological agenda that's different than the way that people choose to live, because this is a free nation. We're founded on freedom. And the reason that people continue to come here from places that aren't free. Boy, have a conversation with someone who came from a very oppressive, out from under a very oppressive regime, and have a conversation with them. See what they think about these kinds of things. It will be fascinating. if there's someone out there that comes from that kind of a background that could call in, as a matter of fact. But we're going to continue this discussion. We got a couple more calls. Going to get some other folks on the air and let them share with us what their perspective is this morning. And again, we're going to go to break a little bit early. And you're listening to Dez Dickerson this morning on Super Talk 99.7 WTN.
$11:30 on the dot. I'm Ken Weaver with your top stories. East Loop, eastbound downtown, is backed up. You've got debris blocking the right lane. Actually, that's a disabled vehicle blocking the right lane, but debris blocking the left lane right there at Shelby Avenue. Then south of Nashville, 24 eastbound, down to one lane again in Murfreesboro for construction. Right now in Kentucky, 5 people dead in Louisville. Another 8 wounded after a man opened fire in the conference room of a bank before it opened for the day's business. This man was there.
We have a break room, and I got in there and shut the door for a second. I opened the door to see where he was at, and I could see him still shooting. I didn't see his face, and then I took off running out the front door.
Aaron Katursky with more.
I believe this one did act alone, and it does appear this is a classic case of workplace violence. The shooter had a known connection to the bank, possibly a former employee.
An emotional Governor Andy Beshear confirming he knew 3 of the victims and thanked first responders for quick response, the FBI and ATF helping the investigation. That's the latest news. Weather is next. I'm Ken Weaver, WTN News.
One of the big words being thrown around in the investing world right now is this one. You may have heard it. Fiduciary. The idea that the investment advisor has to keep your interest first when they give advice. Now, it's being used in a marketing sense right now, and one of the things that I found fascinating, there was a study by the University of Southern California and Indiana University. They looked at investment advisor portfolios and they found that they were making basic academic mistakes in the management of their own portfolios. And the question that they asked was, if they can't even keep their own best interest first, how are they going to keep your best interest first? That was the question. Now, one of the things that we do at Paul Winkler Inc. is every one of our offices, 10 offices, is run by a degreed planner, number one. But we go way beyond the call of duty when it comes to fiduciary and making sure that we're using academically sound principles in investing. Evidence-based. In other words, it's backed by a lot of this is backed by Nobel Prize winning research. To learn more about our approach to investing in financial planning, go to paulwinkler.com and set up a free 15-minute phone call or call 615-851-1950.
yes. Music for the traffic mayhem in downtown Nashville. You ever notice that pretty much every disaster movie ever made, somehow Morgan Freeman ends up being president? Seriously. Now that's a conspiracy theory.
Yeah, now we're getting,
Now we're getting that. Are the Illuminati backing Morgan Freeman?
Oh, for that, we need this music.
There we go.
There we go.
I love it. I love it. So yeah, the truth is out there. We're going to find out what's happening with the traffic. Actually, what's happening with the traffic is, the population of the greater metro area has swelled by about 800% in the last 2 years. So that has something to do with it. At any rate, interesting. We had some callers hanging on, but they had to take bathroom breaks or something. So we're gonna forge ahead, and I do want to touch on again this issue of if we're truly united in seriousness with respect to keeping kids safe, then why wouldn't we do the things that are proven effective in keeping kids safe? There's a gentleman who keeps and studies statistics specific to good shooter, bad shooter, just to kind of oversimplify it. And the numbers, the government numbers with respect to how the data is parsed regarding, gun violence and mass shootings, et cetera. This gentleman claims that the numbers of incidents that are either stopped completely or interrupted quickly by, good people with firearms, that it's much higher than what's reported. Because and again, just reality and common sense dictates, well, of course, good people with guns and bad people with guns, good people can put a stop to bad people using guns to do harm. It's common sense. Of course, common sense isn't very common any longer. So what's wrong with the idea that it's not the gun that's the problem? The issue is the person that's using the gun. I mean, cars are used in the commission of crimes all the time. I haven't heard any outcry for the confiscation of cars. Well, there are some people that might want that. Every year, and I've looked up the statistic in the past. Every year, there are well over 1,000 choking deaths. People who choked on a sandwich or whatever the deal might be. I haven't heard a call for regulations to eliminate sandwiches or sandwich bread or delis or whatever. And I'm using ludicrous examples because the perspective is ludicrous. There are people who are utilizing whatever they have at their disposal to do harm. And it behooves us to recognize that the issue is keeping people safe, not necessarily dealing strictly with trying to eliminate the implements that those folks use. So I want to know, anybody that wants to call in and weigh in on this topic, I want to know what you think about it. I want to know if you have thoughts about this. I want to know if you've thought about it at all. Because at this point in time, if you were to believe what you hear on television, if you were to believe what you see online, whether it's Yahoo News or, whatever the case might be, you would think that everyone is up, no pun intended, everyone is up in arms about America being overarmed. Who do you believe? What do you believe? I believe that we are in the hour of unreality versus reality. That we're no longer in the era of right versus left. We're no longer in the era of red versus blue. We're no longer even strictly in the era of right versus wrong. Because the concepts, the very concept of what is right and what is wrong, those are being not just challenged, but attacked. So, if we frame things in the context of reality and unreality, there are things that are true, there are things that are false. There are things that are real, there are things that are unreal. There are things that are right, there are things that are wrong. If we look through that lens, then our solutions, in the words of Elvis Costello, our aim will be true. Let's go to Deborah from Nashville on the WWTN hotline. Deborah, are you with us?
I'm here.
All right. Well, what's on your mind?
Well, I just want to add on to what you're talking about. In my mind, even with the what happened in the legislature recently, everybody is overlooking the obvious in that case. They're overlooking the fact that these people broke the rules of decorum and they're latching on to a different perspective, no different than the shooting. You know, they don't want to look at the fact that people are going to get guns no matter how many rules they put in place. These rules are only going to be harmful to the people who are actually lawful citizens.
Yeah, good point. Go ahead.
Oh, that was pretty much my point. It's you know, they want to overlook obvious and latch on to their agenda items.
And thanks for your call. That is the essence of unreality thinking. That is the purpose of the unreality lobby, to convince you to join them in opting into the "it is if we say it is" fantasy and fiction. Because there are things that are right, there are things that are wrong, there are things that are true, there are things that are false. And don't even get me started on the rules of decorum and order and those kinds of things. Because once we kind of open that can of worms, now we're in that land that also intersects on the issues of reality and unreality, of selectivity and objectivity, and what's right for me is sin for thee. And that set of slippery slopes, where actions taken by one group are applauded, and the same action taken by another group is grounds to be thrown into the hole. That's a whole other world that that's a conversation for another day. But I want to thank Deborah for her call. And again, understand that the times that we're living in, they are what they are. The notion that we're going to just, things are pretty good and I got a raise at work and we're making a good living and the lawn came in nicely this year or whatever, that's not going to be enough. So it's important that we kind of put action to vigilance. And I'm not talking about the other ditch, where crazy people with pitchforks and torches. I'm not talking about that. But I am talking about within your sphere of influence. Are you a voice and a force, a representative of reality? Good question. Something to think about. We're going to take another break. You're listening to Super Talk 99.7. WTN, Dez Dickerson with you this morning. Coming in on that clubhouse turn. Getting ready for that 19th hole, ladies and gentlemen. We'll be right back. All right. We are coming toward the end of the hour, end of the show. Not the end of the age, though, hopefully. Seems like it sometimes. But we got a couple more calls we want to get in. We got Mark in Spring Hill. Wants to talk about red flag laws. Let's get Mark in here. Or not. Mark, you with us?
I'm here. Thanks very much.
All right.
Yeah, I just had a thought. I've been very much against red flag laws in general. They just tend to make me nervous. But I have to wonder if maybe there's a good idea that if somebody on their social media is putting pronouns that don't match their birth gender, that sounds to me like crazy, and maybe that's a good reason to have a red flag law for somebody. I just want to hear what your thoughts on that sort of thing would be.
So here's what you're flying straight into the teeth of. That's bad grammar. My English teacher will probably come slap me upside my head. But here's the bottom line. You just fit the absolute textbook definition with that statement of what the unreality cohort would label as a racist, sexist, bigot, homophobe, transphobe. Because how dare you single out people who are non-binary? So here's the interesting thing. If we were to go back, say, 30 years and look at not the physician's desk reference, but whatever the equivalent is that they used in the psychiatric and clinical world, there were things that we now defend as aggrieved constituencies that were then termed as deviant behavior, or some sort of mental or emotional condition of instability. So bottom line is, if we're going to get down the slippery slope of red flag laws, then who is it that's going to hold the flag? Who is it that's going to write the rule book? And that's where it gets tricky, because understand, clear thinkers, that there are people that have labeled you as being crazy and you as being evil and you as being the problem. Interesting. We got Rodney in Old Hickory wants to talk about this, wants to weigh in. Rodney, let's get Rodney on the line. I keep hearing Alec Baldwin's voice in my head. Rodney, you with us?
Oh, yes, here I am.
All right, what do you got? I'm doing well. How you doing?
I'm doing great. I just got a couple of things that I would like to ask. One's personal and one's, has to do with the topic, if it's got time. Like the gun laws, that they're trying to pass and keep, every time there's a shooting, they want to pass a little higher gun law. Well, look at the statistics in Chicago or L.A. or New York. Mm-hmm. They got the strictest gun laws, and they have the most mass shootings, or, the more shootings than anything.
Yeah, that's true. Now, what they'll tell you, the anti-gun lobby among the politicos, et cetera, the media in Chicago, what they'll tell you is, well, that's because of Indiana's laws. That that guns are they're packing in cars and driving across the border, and they're committing crimes in Chicago. But again, that's unreality.
Right.
So what else you got?
And the sidebar is, my brother used to go to church with you at Bethel Chapel.
Wow.
And he actually said that you donated a piano to them, and he went over and picked it up at your house.
Wow. You know what? I remember that. I remember donating it. And, bottom line is some things are better. They're a better seed than a harvest. So sometimes give it to somebody who's going to use it. Well, that's awesome.
So are you going to is this your regular gig, or are you just guest spotting today?
Well, that's going to depend. If you want it to be my regular gig, have your whole family call in, text, email.
Oh, no, yeah.
I'm enjoying it, and we'll see what goes. As long as I don't step on a rake, I might have a shot. So we'll see.
Awesome. Well, hey, is it possible to text you my number that we could talk, off the air or something? I just wanted to talk a little more. I got other things common with you as far as music-wise. I'm a DJ that I got all vinyl, and I got maybe a couple of records I would love for you to sign.
Well, Rodney, I tell you what, text on the super text line, or super talk line, rather. It'll get to me. All right? Thanks for calling, though. All right, we got Lindsay, Pleasant Shade. I want to know where Pleasant Shade is, first of all. Lindsay, are you with us? Evidently, the shade's so pleasant that I was genuinely curious because
I was too, honestly.
And it just sounds like one of those things where if it lives up to its name, what a delightful place. I want to visit there.
Pleasant Shade.
But have you noticed that all too often places like they're the antithesis of their name? Hopefully that's not the case in Pleasant Shade, but at any rate. Well, Lindsay, we'll be back tomorrow, so feel free to call in and we'll talk then. So I so appreciate just the hospitality, folks that have been welcoming. Some folks. Here's the thing: I understand about the dynamics of public speaking. Statistically, anytime you are engaged in public speaking, 5% of your audience will decide immediately that they don't like you.
Wow.
5%. We opened for the Rolling Stones one time, 100,000 people. 5% of 100,000 people, that's a lot of folks. But in this case, I want to thank the 95%. The 5%, I'm praying for you. God bless you. But it's been a wonderful thing. We'll see you again tomorrow morning. I'm Dez Dickerson, Super Talk 99.7 WTN. It's been real. We'll see you tomorrow.
From ABC News, I'm Daria Albinger. 5 people are dead after an early morning mass shooting in Louisville, Kentucky.
It's believed this one did act alone, and it does appear this is a classic case of workplace violence. The shooter had a known connection to the bank, possibly a former employee, and so police are going to run that down. In addition to the 5 dead, there are 8 that have been wounded, including a police officer in critical condition, now undergoing surgery. A second officer sustained a non-critical injury while responding to this.
ABC's Aaron Katersky. The Nashville City Council is expected to vote today to restore State Representative Justin Jones to his House seat. He was one of 2 black Democratic lawmakers expelled last week by their Republican colleagues for leading protests on gun control from the House floor in the wake of a deadly school shooting. At the White House today, President Biden mixes Easter eggs with politics.
President Biden said Monday he plans on running for re-election, a different phrasing than what he's been saying in recent months, which is that his intention is to run. The president talking to NBC News' Al Roker at the White House Easter egg roll.
Well, I plan on running now, but we're not prepared to announce it yet.
Roker tried to get the president to say whether he would take part in the annual Easter event after 2024.
Well, I plan on at least 3 or 4 more Easter egg rolls.
The president told ABC's David Muir in February his intention is to run for re-election, but signaled an announcement was not in the immediate future. Karen Travers, ABC News, Washington.
The main campus of the University of Massachusetts has purchased more than a year's worth of mifepristone before a nationwide injunction goes into effect. ABC's Rachel Scott.
It's been nearly a year since the Supreme Court overturned Roe versus Wade. President Biden warning the Texas ruling is the next big step toward a national ban on abortion. But so far, we quite frankly have heard little from Republicans on this.
Washington State's already purchased a 3-year supply of the drug. You're listening to ABC News.